Welcome back everyone to Museum Diaries. This is another one of our vlogs. There's Veronica. Hello Veronica. We're going to be going into Sister Meat today, but she's going to be talking about the Boogieman. This is the shirt she's wearing that all our Patreons have. It's got the logo in the front and it says, "Put a cap on capitalism, the Duchess." That's her quote, and she's going to show you the shirt I'm wearing. The shirt I'm wearing is not available to our Platinum Patreons. We paid a little bit more for these shirts, but if you're interested in one of these shirts, let us know. We have Jane Doe on the back of the t-shirt. And then on the front of the shirt, we have the mall logo right here from Museum Americana, and on the side we have "Where Genius Thrives," which is our motto for when we get to being creative. Whether it's painting or writing or photography or videography, whatever we're doing.
Okay, this is called Finding the Boogeyman. Who has the power? Is that even coming in my direction? It looks like it's more over here.
You're fine.
You can see me? Okay. Finding the Boogeyman. Who has the power to frighten you the most? Is it the one who holds your finances, money, children in the palm of their hand? Is it the person who you feel an overwhelming love for? A love that often confuses you, upsets you, and ultimately controls you so much you change your words and desires to please them? Are you in a relationship? Do you want a relationship because you feel eaten up with loneliness? Are you drawn to the macho man, the wealthy, arrogant yuppie? Or do you find the three-time loser, the lost puppy you take home to take care of? The face or description of a boogeyman is as individual as a victim's history of abuse. What is not as unique is their treatment of a woman. A boogeyman is a dysfunctional male predominantly, a misogynist, or if you're a lesbian, your boogeyman can also be a woman. Abusers come in all colors and genders, all ages. Often the boogeyman is met accidentally, or so you think. It is an unplanned meeting. However, within us are definite emotional patterns and choices which are made to correspond with those patterns. Example, Veronica Compton goes to interview the Hillside Strangler, and while she found him basically resistant as a subject to study for her work, she didn't resign from the task when another would have. You read the next page, please.
Often it is the person who we perceive as possessing strength, a person who offers guidance or seeming superiority. The boogeyman often admires their own ability to be cruel and asserts this cruelty like a dictator. Others are swayed to follow the dictates or desires of the boogeyman, and he appears to be in command of life. The victim is often intrigued, not necessarily romantically, at the onset of meeting the boogeyman. Initially, there will be something he has that she needs, and this is the excuse for the real meeting of the two. Veronica felt compelled to complete her study of this serial murderer, and she compromised a little bit more of herself and freedom with each interaction. When he asked her personal questions about her childhood and life, she lost her professional status in the relationship by giving him information about herself. Veronica believed at the time it was a game of sorts, like a poker hand where one must put money up as a raise or ante. If she put her portion out, he'd meet her and give his information out. She lied to herself about him and viewed him unrealistically. This, something she needed, she labeled as research. However, from the subsequent events we know, she set herself up to be used by Bianchi. This something is a pretense, though the victim won't recognize this until long after she's undergone the entire scenario, survived it, worked through it, and through therapy or assistance from a healing source. What catches them, the bait, so to speak, is a smile, a gesture, a comment, something the boogeyman offers.
Like a piece of candy to a child. The bait is taken when the victim responds internally with the butterflies in the tummy experience. It's like an instant instant internal click. And from that point, the trance begins. It is a victim trance that levels her common sense and wariness until all the cards are played in this game. She is lost and consumed by this madness. With each interaction, real or imagined, the victim's ability to be true to her own best interests diminish a bit more. Eventually, her defenses to respond with self-preservation deteriorates, and she becomes a slave whose existence corresponds, bends, yields, twists, and turns to keep the boogeyman appeased. Quote, Kathleen told Richard Ramirez about being a subject of this book. She then wrote me a letter stating she had lied. She made up all the information about her life and her current relationship with the Night Stalker. Further, she wrote that Richard didn't want to be mentioned. The victim may see the boogeyman, end of quote. That was my quote. The victim may see the boogeyman as a big bully child, which she must mother. They see reality with gross distortion, believing the cruelties these men issue are bred from a need to be loved. The victim herself, wanting to be loved and cared for, displaces her own needs onto the abuser, emotionally projecting her fears and emotional cravings onto the abuser. Why and how does one do this? It is a true phenomenon, no doubt. This thing we call empathy and sympathy. It is what bonds normal functioning people to one another, and it creates families, communities, and humanity itself. With a human being or a child that has no need to defend itself, empathy and sympathy operate easily and naturally. If, however, that individual is being violated and must defend itself against a force greater and stronger than she is, and this victimization is reenacted enough, the victim will search for an explanation or answer within the parameters of her knowledge. Why? Why me? Then there comes the resounding, I'm not doing anything wrong that I know of. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want to be loved, be safe. Why are they doing this? The abuser will frequently blame the victim, repeatedly telling the victim it's her fault. She made him abuse her. Shelley overheard her little sister crying because her stepfather was beating her. Shelley ran into the room and leaped onto her stepfather's back to stop him from further hurting her little sister. The stepfather grabbed Shelley off his back and hurled her into a corner and began kicking her. Shelley suffered broken ribs. The stepfather told her, "See what you made me do? It's your fault." The abuser tells her what she made him do. What does that translate to? That she, the victim, is so powerful that she can control the abuser? She commanded him to abuse her, and therefore she is the one in control. She being the one in control means he is out of control, and she is the one with the power to control him. Like a mother with a wayward child, the abuser is then like a child, having a temper tantrum. Why do children have temper tantrums? Because they are frustrated and able to get their needs met.
Are they merely calling out for love? Could love temper their rage? Could attention and devotion feed their emotional hunger and cure the abuser? No, and it's not her job to attempt to do this, but she'll try because the abuser will often tell her how he loves her and he's sorry he hurt her. The honeymoon phase now begins until his self-control weakens He is a time bomb. He will explode again and repeat the cycle of abuse. What other solutions are left to the victim who has already unsuccessfully tried? There's verbal demands such as, don't do that, I want you to stop, please don't hurt me, etc. Once the verbal pleas are exhausted, the victim resorts to physically opposing the abuser by holding her hands in front of her to protect herself, pushing the usually physically stronger abuser off her, even punching, slapping, kicking, or biting or hitting the abuser, still unsuccessfully in warding off the abuse. The last resort is screaming and begging frantically for help. When it has all failed and the abuse continues, the victim is taught in direct first-hand terms that she is lost to victimization. Recall, we are speaking of a victim who has no option in ending their victimization, opportunities to get away, or knowledge of how to get help. Primarily, I am speaking of children that are truly trapped, but this can apply to women also. It is this kind of experience repeated early in their development that leads them to become adult women who seek out a boogeyman and then stay in abusive relationships when others around her see her option for escape. The victim will not see these options. Those eyes of self-preservation have long been blinded out of her awareness. It is a historical brainwashing of sorts. It is what blacks refer to as an Uncle Tom mentality. Uncle Tom.
Uncle Tom, the loyal black slave that denied his own freedom during liberation times to serve his white oppressive master. It is a system of enslavement, this reenacted abuse that the victim can find no exit from. Once the victim has tried every means of defense and escape possible and fails at every attempt, she can still emerge psychologically intact if that abuse isn't repeated too often. However, if the victim undergoes the victimization over and over again, and again each time, unsuccessfully escaping or halting it, she has learned that she is powerless. She is powerless, and that reality forces her to create new skills to survive and cope within a horrible situation. Survival becomes paramount. The victim is faced with her own potential to be murdered by someone else. Whatever social manners or behaviors of right or wrong morality are thrown out the window. If the victim were a man, we could say he was emasculated or castrated. But because the victim is a woman, we have no like term, as women have already socially been disenfranchised from a literal term of empowerment. To say effeminated is to empower, since to be a woman carries connotations of passivity. Survival is met second by second, and no rules apply. The victim must seek out and try to assess the abuser's whim. It's done so spontaneously and quickly, she doesn't have the time to reflect on what she's doing. It's survival won on instinct.
An abused 11-year-old runaway has fled her home to escape the abuse. As a runaway, she is alone and must depend on strangers to feed and shelter her. A stranger offers her a place to sleep and eat. She accepts the hospitality only to find the stranger locking her in his apartment, using a knife and physical force to make her undress. She verbally tells him no. He ignores it and uses physical force. She, in response, uses physical force to resist his rape of her. She screams and cries loud to alert outside help, but no one comes. The abuser beats her even more forcefully as he is now enraged and sexually excited. As the child's body responds to the injury and begins to bleed and feels the hard pain of his blows, she realizes her tears and cries get no sympathy, and her fighting back causes her more severe punishments. She realizes if she continues to resist, she could lose her life. The assailant is out of control. The girl freezes and shuts up as the rapist has his way with her. Later, she waits until he falls asleep. Still naked, she tries to run out of the apartment, but he catches her and drags her back screaming. He beats her into a silence again and now tears a sheet to tie her naked body to his dining table legs. Here, he keeps her only to repeat the rapes and abuse. The victim knows neighbors could hear her screams for help, as she can hear their ongoings from the hall, and yet no one comes to her help. The victim has been utterly betrayed by the world, first from her family and then by the community around her. As the victimization continues, the runaway child becomes less and less resistant because she grows tired, hungry, and emotionally traumatized. Physically injured, she's in pain. Psychologically, she has exhausted all her mental logic and intelligence to end the abuse. She has failed to stop the abuse, and at this point decides if she tries to please him, maybe he'll be nice to her. She tries to soften him up, in a sense. It is the only option left to her. She stops pushing him off when he touches her. She is silent because he gets mad if she speaks. When he pushes her face into his penis, she accepts the order to put it in her mouth and suck. At night, when he unties her from the table legs and ties her to the bedpost, he orders her to lie in bed beside him. She does. It is later, after the adrenaline comes down, that her conscience will torture her with guilt and self-loathing for giving unto acts she hated just to stop the abuser's anger. She performs to his desires because she knows she has no other options. Remember, she has exhausted all human resources known to her to escape or halt the abuse. She's faced her own potential death. Also, during the abuse, if the abuser has or has not ever committed murder previously is not the issue. As any victim of historical abuse can tell you, during segments of the abuse, the abuser has no sense of reason. If the victim resisted from going with his commands, he very well could have kept the abuse escalating to the point of murder. It is the victim's survival instinct recognizing this escalating rage that makes the victim yield to the abuser's whim. And the abuser has no limits. All that separates the abuser from a murderer is the victim's forced willingness to bend to the abuser's demands. She is willing to survive and goes along with abuse only to see this end met. We know that during the Holocaust, a segment of the Jews and others were taken to camps under the Hitler regime and were also systematically broken psychologically. These victims underwent a process of victimization which Hitler and his upper echelon experts contrived in order to specifically dismantle them as a unified people and successfully commit the genocide the Nazi regime sought. It is no coincidence. Could you stop that, please? It is no coincidence that through the horrors of murder and torture, physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual, some Holocaust victims became helpers to the camp Nazis. The, quote, capos, unquote, were often selected from the groups of prisoners specifically because they had been successfully broken psychologically. These capos, once broken, could be ordered to kill and torture their own people. They were trusted to give their loyalty to Nazis above the Jew. This is a serious consideration and should make us all pause. An innocent adult is violently taken and put into prison by a tyrant. They undergo inconceivable horrors by these captors and should seemingly despise the injustices they undergo and especially despise the people responsible. And yet, the adult prisoner does not. Instead, they turn on their own families and community and begin praising and emulating the ideas and behaviors of their oppressors. Why? Survival instinct, an effort to escape their own murder. Granted, many Jews and others, I'm also a Jew, granted many Jews and others valiantly resisted the temptations of joining and cowing down to the camp terrorist Nazis, but most of those resisting died. Very few survived to tell us the stories and bear witness to the truth. They were the exceptions. What concerns us is why one individual became a capo traitor
and another does not. And yet, why another is capable of resistance, I lean towards the opinion that each person's prior historical making of character and their own disposition that they're born with is the reason. And yet there are predispositions of temperament that emerge even prior to birth, although I postulate the latter is more minimal a contribution. And so now we have the compliant victim, a victim who still unquestionably is a victim, yet she defies what we have been socially taught, an unwilling participant in an act against herself. This poses a serious psychological mindfuck for the victim. She participates with an abuser in her own victimization. Take Mary, a 20-year-old woman in prison serving 70 years for 2 counts of first-degree murder. Mary has had a lifetime of abuse and abandonment. Shuffled off at 7 to foster homes and institutions, she eventually ran away for the last time to live with a man who completely demoralized and terrorized her. She is later convicted of murdering her boyfriend's pregnant wife and mother-in-law in a fit of jealousy. Once in prison, she becomes involved with a male guard and a lesbian prisoner. Her lesbian lover is her boogeyman and delivers beatings, public humiliations, and verbally calling her ugly and other words that are obscenities. Mary is seen wiping her own blood off the unit's bathroom wall in efforts to cover up her lover's abuse of her. She wears long-sleeve shirts to conceal bruises. When confronted about why she is protecting her abuser, she says, "Oh, she didn't mean to hurt me or hit me. She really loves me. I got her mad. Please don't say anything about it, okay? Promise me you won't talk about it. It's really nothing." Mary will lie for her abuser. When her abuser has a vendetta against another prisoner or staff, Mary will write false witness statements to get others in trouble if her lover tells her to. Mary will steal from or cheat other women who befriend her if her lover tells her to. All these actions by Mary further her own abuse. She doesn't alert staff about the beatings and denies them, and so they continue. When she lies about staff or other prisoners in these false documents, statements that are used against others, staff and prisoners grow to dislike her. When she steals from or cheats anyone who
Okay, Lucky, I'm gonna have to put you down unless you want to switch. You want to take Lucky? She wants to be held. Okay. We're just trading off Lucky here, you guys. Napoleon!
He's fine.
Okay, he went outside. I just worried that he might skip over
fine.
to the other yard.
He's fine.
But okay, Veronica's been working with him and training him. So anyhow, okay. Who may truly wish to help her or be her friend, she destroys valuable bridges that could help her to rescue herself out of the situation she's trapped within. On another day, perhaps after being badly abused, Mary may confide, "I can't take this. She, her lover, is crazy and I can't get away from her. I just want her to leave me alone, but she won't and I'm too scared to leave her." And still the cycle is repeated. The episodes of previous abuse are pushed out of awareness, sometimes not even remembered until years have passed and or healing therapy has begun. Recalling that the runaway child had begun to cooperate with her abuser, she's no longer fighting off his physical abuse and even sleeps beside him, demonstrates the psychological breaking has occurred. Days later, another man comes to visit the abuser and sees that the 11-year-old runaway girl is under the table naked and tied to the table leg. The abuser orders the girl to cover her eyes. She obeys silently. After some discussion, the visitor convinces the abuser to let the girl go. It is negotiated with the victim that they will let her go if she keeps her eyes closed while the visitor leads her out of the apartment into his car. Also, she must swear never to tell anyone or the police what has happened. The runaway victim agrees. She is dressed and led out of the apartment into a car. After some driving, the visitor tells the girl he'll feed her, but she must not open her eyes. She eats, and the two drive a bit more. The visitor pulls over to a curb and tells the victim to open the door. Step up to a curb, keeping her eyes shut. She is ordered to count to 200 before she opens her eyes, and she must not turn to look at the car or license plate, or he'll come back and this time kill her. The victim obeys. Later, when the runaway girl is in a safer environment, she recalls the episode of this virtual kidnapping and torture, rape, but she has psychologically blocked off all memory of the rapist's face, his car, or where his apartment is located. What she will always be left with is the knowledge that men are not only able to control her to the point of self-betrayal, but they cooperate with each other to conceal violence and abuse. This runaway girl continued to go from one catastrophe to another. She knew she was unable to get help from the police or system, as all they offered her was life in institutions which were hells in themselves. So she hitchhiked from town to town, undergoing rapes and beatings, which merely added to her notion that the world was entirely threatening, and the only way to cope was to find one boogeyman that could keep the others away. This she eventually did. In time, the series of abuse she lived within began to be internalized. She could see other girls and women who were protected and safe, but they inhabited a world she did not. To assuage the knowledge of such disparity, she drank and took medications to numb her rage and frustrations so she could cooperate with the abuser of the day.
Okay, so that's that segment, and I hope it enlightens some of you, strengthened you. It's all true, and it's an unfortunate reality that's happening to other people.
Stop.
As I speak.
Stop.
Ones that we don't know about, because if we ever find anyone screaming or anything like that, we check it out. We call whatever services need to be employed to help what's going on, to stop it. So thank you for watching, and I hope that there was some educational value for you.
Yeah, and if you're in an abusive relationship, you know, you gotta think about what we just read about your boogeyman, who your boogeyman is. And it all comes down to how you're feeling about it, what you're willing to change about it, if there can be any change. You know, make the change before bigger mistakes happen, I guess.
Reach out, because there are crises hotlines. You can find them, I promise you. I can't remember the new number of, it's not 911, it's 988.
No, it's 311.
311 for...
services and resources.
Yeah. But there are these services now. In that era, there weren't services because this kind of thing was not spoken about and it was denied. And I have to think that it was because the judges, the men that were involved when the victim came forth and said, oh, my dad's raping me, or whatever the horror is, they pretty much dismissed it and blamed the girl for being promiscuous and seducing the man. Well, now we've come a long way, and we have another long way to go to get to equality. So bear that in mind. Help those that are looking, that you see, that need help. Please, don't close your heart to them or minds.
Okay, I'm trying to keep the dogs at bay here because Napoleon wants to keep barking at Lucky. He wants to play with Lucky. But I hope you've taken this in and thought about it, and we want to thank you for listening to this segment of Sister Me. But this is one of Veronica's writings that she wanted to share with you. And one of the things I will never forget was when you were sharing the story of the boogeyman that came across and kidnapped you, and then you tried to escape, and the neighbors did nothing.
Right.
They just turned the other way.
Yeah, that was, you know, an eye opener and horrifying.
Yeah, that would make me think that the world is filled with horrible people.
And it was, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it still goes on. We can't be in denial, and when we see it, we have to do our best to stop it and help.
Yeah, I see people on the streets when I'm driving, and I go to places, and I wonder, are they a boogeyman? You know, I'm always vigilant and careful wherever I go. I don't like going places by myself, but when I do, I'm just extra
hyper aware.
Yeah, I'm definitely hyper aware, more than I usually am when I'm with you.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right, you guys, thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe to Museum Americana on YouTube. And remember, we have a Facebook. We're at museumamericana.com on Facebook. Okay, you guys, thanks for watching.
Thank you. Peace out.